But what it taught me is that at an enterprise level, there are effectively 4 decision makers in the process. And what often happens is that, in traditional sales, we're taught to make sure that we're talking to the economic buyer, the person that can sign the check.
Welcome to the Master Dealmakers Secrets Podcast. And now, here's sales growth strategist, John Blake.
Hey, we are on episode 204, and I am particularly excited because I've got Lloyd Thompson with me. Lloyd is the founder of VirtualDOO, the author of 9 Ways to Leave Your Day-to-Day Operations. He liberates busy business owners from their daily operational management so that they can focus on their passion, strategy, and shaking the tree for new business. He has spent 20 years in the corporate world, discovered an opportunity to provide director of operations services on a fractional basis to smaller non-corporates that are more nimble and interesting. I met Lloyd recently on a boat trip in the Maldives, and we connected, and I've been meaning to get him on the podcast for a while, and we have come up with a really unique idea, I think. Given that we're both learning, sales and marketing nerds, so we've got massive collections of books. In fact, I see Lloyd doing reviews on certain books that he's read all the time on LinkedIn, and so the idea for today is for us to both share our 3 top books. And what's interesting is that obviously Lloyd's going to share his books with looking through the lens of what he does, which is to offer this operational type service to businesses, and of course mine is through the lens of sales. So we thought that we might have the same books, but we've kind of cheated and talked about them already. So maybe what I'll do, Lloyd, if you want to fill in any of the blanks that I might have missed in your introduction, you can do that. But we should get stuck into it in terms of the 3 books that we've brought along to review and why.
That's great. Thanks so much for having me here, John. Well, so the first book actually very much relates to what I do. So what a nice way to start with an intro. So yeah, it's a few years ago now, and I was out in the surf and contemplating how I would like my situation to change and how I'd like to fully work remotely and how could I do that. And I was talking to our mutual friend, James Schramko, and I said, what could I do with my skills of running large remote teams? And my background had mainly been in payments and banking. And I talked about, how I make operations run smoothly and all of these things. And he said to me, you sound like an integrator. And I said, an integrator? That sounds like a tech role. I hadn't heard that term. And he said, read this book, Rocket Fuel, and come back to me and let me know what you think. And I went, all right, okay. Rocket Fuel is my first book. And I read Rocket Fuel, and Rocket Fuel talks about these 2 characters, the visionary and the integrator. And it says a lot of great businesses like, Ford or Disney, and a lot of these big companies have these 2 characters, the visionary and the integrator. And the visionary is this person, the big ideas, set sail, where's the ship heading? What's the big dream? Probably has a bazillion ideas, but doesn't necessarily implement all of them. And the integrator is the make it happen person. Runs it with a team, makes those dreams come true. Quite often they're a bit more behind the scenes, and they're going to be doing things that probably destroy the soul of the visionary, like putting in repetitive rhythms, feedback loops, all of these things. Yep. And so this book talks about who are these 2 people and which kind of fit are you? And I read this book and I thought, wow, I am an integrator. And so James basically, through many ongoing conversations after that, we got a business started, which is now this, VirtualDOO. And I help businesses by running their operations on a fractional basis. Started off as a fractional integrator, but this big idea came from talking to James and reading Rocket Fuel. And so that is That is the absolute first recommendation. And just to give you a little flavor of a couple of the key takeaways that I like, apart from identifying if you're a visionary or an integrator, as I've talked about.
Yeah.
There's rules of how these people play together. And I've definitely used this in day-to-day. So just to give you a little example, one might be stay on the same page. Sounds really obvious. But your visionary and your integrator, they need to catch up often, have a regular checkpoint. And I've seen cases where if they don't have that regular catch-up, their ideas start diverging. So there's a great rule there. Another one is no end runs. So don't try and go around that integrator, that person who sits between the visionary and the team, to get a different result from the founder, because then you're sort of destroying the integrity of the team. And then a last one would be the integrator is the tiebreaker. So part of what they're doing is installing accountability in the team, saying, look, you're responsible for this. This is you. These are the decisions that you can make. But when it's unclear who will make the decision, that's when it can come back to an integrator. So there you go. That is my first book, and that's how my career and my start of my entrepreneurial journey began, with that book, Rocket Fuel.
Awesome. And I've seen that play out so many times, where you've got someone who's really good at coming up with ideas, but they're quite crap at implementation. And one of the things that I find myself doing for clients, not necessarily something that I volunteer to do, but something that I just end up doing, is running their sales meetings.
Yeah.
And often that's where a lot of that communication between the visionary and the actual integrator take place.
Yep.
And it's quite bizarre how often those sales meetings are either not regular or they're really, really unproductive, and they often don't talk about the most important things, And so as you say that, it's like, okay, well, I've seen that play out so many times, and the problems that it creates.
And it's really important to have in those proper structures. Like, we're not just going to come together and have a loose chat. Part of what a good leadership role is doing is, what I'm seeing you would do is come in and provide that structure and make sure there's that regular cadence. So, big overlap.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just simple things like, okay, at the end of the meeting, there needs to be some actions.
Yeah. Well, what did we just talk about? It was all fluff.
It's like, because I've been, and you've worked in the corporate world as well. And I've been in meetings where it's like the game everyone's playing is, how can I not have to do anything as a result of being in this meeting?
I've definitely seen that before. Yeah. And well, hopefully we don't see any more of that.
Yeah, exactly. So, having actions, but then at the next meeting, it's like having accountability on those actions.
Yeah.
Often that, so many sales meetings don't have that. It's like, okay, at the end of the last meeting, you said you were going to do this, and you said you were going to do this. How'd you go? Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Oh, yeah.
and that's absolutely one of the roles of the integrator is, I'd say another one is making sure there's measurables. So you come into that meeting, it's clear what we're actually going to talk about, what the goal is, what the objective is, and then at the end, like, what are the actions, but what are we measuring? And of course, in the sales world, that's really important, having that measure
and making them punchy. Like, it's like, oh, how, often, these are sort of, I guess, by default type situations. Like, okay, well, how long is your sales meeting? Oh, it's meant to be an hour. Oh, okay. And so how long does it normally go for? Oh, anywhere from an hour and a half to 2.5 hours. It's like, and so we tighten it up. It's like, doesn't have to be any longer than 40 minutes.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, wow. And the other question is like, do you look forward to going to that sales meeting? And most people roll their eyes and go, no. So you have it timed, have it punchy, have a good structure, anything that gets
John,
yeah.
I'm trying to resist the temptation to mention another book here, but I'm just dying to mention it. Meetings Suck by Cameron Herold. Absolutely brilliant book. In fact,
I haven't read
remember
that one either. That sounds like a ripper.
Oh, I can even tell you there's a chapter 10. Chapter 10 of Meetings Suck. I tell everyone who works with me, read this book. And it assigns roles to people in that, like, you're going to be the person who looks after the parking lot. If we're going off topic, you're going to say, this is for the parking lot. We'll talk about it later. You know, you're the person who's going to keep us on time and on track with the agenda and so forth. So there's another book that you just inspired me to share, but that wasn't in my top 3.
Awesome. I'm going to read that because, yeah, we have, someone who's, someone who's taking the notes, someone who's keeping time, someone who's, so yeah, it's, all those things. So I guess I should bust one of mine out.
Yeah. What you got there, John?
This one. So this one changed the way, because I work with small organizations, but I have also sold to and have worked with companies that sell to large organizations. There's a company over here, and I think they might have got bought out, or they might have even gone out of business. But huge mining services company, engineering company, and they were putting together proposals that were anywhere from $100 to $400 million worth. So we're talking, they had like marine and jetty. They would have, so that, they do, jetties and platforms for oil and gas. They're just making huge infrastructure for the mining and the oil and gas industry. And they got me in to work with their salespeople. And having read this book was so useful, because so much of what they do is tenders. And as you know, with tenders, the whole idea is that it's they try and make it a level playing field. But in most cases, it's anything but. But what this book taught me is that at a enterprise level, so it's by Robert Miller and Stephen Hyman. So it's called like the Miller-Hyman model of selling. But what it taught me is that at an enterprise level, there are effectively 4 decision makers in the process. And what often happens is that, in traditional sales, we're taught to make sure that we're talking to the economic buyer, the person that can sign the check, right? That's what we're taught in traditional sales. But in this book, he talks about the fact that there's actually 4 decision makers. There's the economic buyer, the person that has final sign-off on the purchase. There's the user buyer. That's the person who the decision will affect on a daily basis. Right? So if this happens, this guy's got to deal with it on a daily basis, right? He's the user buyer. Then there's the technical buyer, and that's the person that is going to make sure that all of the compliance is there, all of the insurance is in place, all the contracts are properly drawn up, all of the I's are dotted and all the T's are crossed, and all of that stuff's in place. And then you've got the 4th buyer. Then there's the economic buyer, the guy that can sign the check. And then there's the 4th buyer, which is what they call the coach. And the coach is like your inside guy in the organization that can let you know what's going on with the other 3. And then the other thing that I found fascinating is that in different organizations, each one of those 4 people can have different percentages of influence over the decision. And it's played out. It's played out so many times in the businesses that I've coached, and in some of the conversations that I've had with various people, where it's like, okay, so and often, what the way it plays out is that you're talking to someone who's, oh, well, he's the economic buyer, he can sign the check, and so you think, oh, I was dealing with the economic buyer, I'm gonna get this sale, this is in the bag, and then suddenly you don't win it, and you're like, wonder what happened. And it's because somebody else was able to pour cold water on you getting it, because they hadn't been consulted, or you hadn't enrolled them in your process. They didn't know who you were. They didn't understand if you were competent or not. And so you can get railroaded like that. And it wasn't until I read this book that I actually got that, that was like,
And I can see how that
so
is
that
so
became
relevant. Like software
What's
as a
that?
service. I mean, I can see how it's so relevant to say software as a service. Like that's a market that a lot of the businesses that I work with are in that kind of game. And, you can see how, well, great, you've got a person who's going to spend the money, but then you're going to have that, who's going to actually operate this? who's going to take over the engineering side? They're going to want to say, they're going to have their due diligence. And then you're going to have, well, what's the user think of it? Like, who are the users? Do they like the feel of this thing? Is this how it's going to operate? I can instantly relate. I wonder when you say the coach, I think about, and I don't know if this is one of the roles in there, but I've certainly found when I've been talking to prospects, I think quite often they'll put their EA in the call as well, or some of the calls, to organize like meet and greets and things like that. And I think, I bet they've got a big sway because they talk to the founder all the time. Like, I bet they've got some heavy influence here. So, keep them on board.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so the coach is typically, because, often the scenario is like, you've got somebody who works in the organization who may have worked in another organization that actually dealt with you, and they go to the new organization and they say, you know what, you need to be talking to Lloyd.
Mm-hmm.
This guy's good.
Mm-hmm.
And then this person contacts you and says, hey, I want to introduce you to my CEO. They really need what you do, right? And so he's often the person, or she's often the person that can say, and you can say, okay, who's the technical person? Who has the final sign off? And who's the person that's going to be responsible for implementing this? And then, and if you know the questions to ask, it's like, okay, how much pull does that guy have? How much pull does that guy have? How much pull does that guy have?
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, well, how do we make sure that we've demonstrated competency and asked the right questions to each one of those three decision makers to make sure that that we're actually ticking all the boxes as it relates to the area that person looks after. So it's like there was this whole other world that I knew absolutely nothing about, and that's what I got from that book. Wow. All right, your turn. I'm talking about that.
Second book I would say is Who Not How by Dan Sullivan and Dr. Benjamin Hardy. And these two characters have written a few books together now, and I've got through a few of them. This it's a very simple but powerful concept, and a lot of founders have struggled letting go of the reins, but they love being visionaries. And I think just that title explains a lot of it. It's a mental shift or a reframe to, instead of me thinking about how it's going to happen, think about who is the best person. If I was to explain to them the outcome that I'm looking for, who is the best person to be able to take care of that for me? And suddenly when you think about that, like the world is your oyster, and then your ability to do switches to, who do I know in my network who could take care of this? Who would be a really good person? Like, networking's important. And then the other concept out of there is this idea, which I've seen in a few other books as well, like your unique ability. So you as the founder, you're going to be best to play to your strengths. That's probably something that gives you energy. And if you can find the doer who's good at whatever that is to make that thing get done, that gives them energy. Of course, in my business, it's operations. A busy business owner, founder who likes coming up with the big dreams and the big ideas probably get low energy from putting repetitive rhythms in with their team. That stuff kills their soul. But to give it to an operator who loves solving problems is something that's going to light them up. And it doesn't even have to be that big. For me, I used to do my own video editing on Instagram Reels and things like that. It was pretty wacky stuff. But I enjoyed it for a while. And then I heard that one of my team members loves doing this stuff. And it's just, firstly, he's just got so good at this. And secondly, it's like, well, that has freed me up so much time. I can see how good this character is. So simple idea, who not how, love that book. In fact, that's one of the books that when I see founders constantly talking about how, I send them that book. I'm like, here, straight in the post, take care of that. And
that's so good.
Get that idea.
Yeah, I need to read that. I definitely need to read. I definitely need to read that book. Yeah, I will. I will read that book. So, this one is called is by Alan Weiss, who's the known as the $1 Million Consultant, and this book showed me how to be able to increase fees and effectively make your fees a no-brainer because you have uncovered such a high amount of potential value that the client can clearly see you can provide. So it's like, how do you make the value so high, the perceived value of the work that you can do so high, so that your fees look small by comparison, but they're still, a lot more than what you would normally charge,
I remember reading. I remember reading $1 Million Consulting, and it had a section in there about that. By obviously Alan Weiss, and
So I've got all his books, but this one in particular is a ripper.
Yeah, right. Well, I think that's going in the list now.
Yeah, definitely. So I look at I've constantly been back to this book, for that reason, and there's also some other really cool stuff. I mean, it's interesting. It's like the paperback version. I think it's like $80 or something. So it's actually quite an expensive book, but it's very worth it. It's bloody good.
I just remember from that book, he said, if you were trying to talk about your pricing in hours, it might sound expensive. And he basically made some harsh comment. This is $1 million. If you're pricing in hours, you're an amateur. That was the comment. I was like,
yeah, of course. Yeah.
And then he says, but
so he talks about project-based fees.
Yeah. And then
project-based fees.
If I was to say to someone, if we deliver this, it will make you $1 million. Your fee is 10% of that. Well, suddenly asking for $100,000 doesn't sound so hard.
Correct, right? It's because it's all relative. It's like compared to what? Someone says to you, "Oh, I need you to do this project." It's like, yeah, well, it'll be $100,000. Well, in isolation, it's like, what? Yeah. But if the upside, if you've uncovered enough upside, well, then the fee becomes largely irrelevant.
Yeah.
So
I'll have to get into that one.
Yeah, that's a ripper. All right, your turn.
All right. Well, the last one I had on the list, and we did show our cards a little bit before this.
We did.
So I bet John's got this one in our list, and I was like,
well, it's on my bookshelf, but it wasn't on my list.
Good to Great by Jim Collins, and there are concepts in this book that I refer to so often, and they pop up in other leadership management books. And so, for those who haven't read or come across Good to Great, Jim Collins did a study of, I think it was 2,000 plus companies. And then he isolated the ones that performed well in nearly all market conditions. So, there was a recession, then there was this, and there was that. It's like, these are the really, truly great companies. Now, are there any common attributes between these great companies? And lo and behold, there was. And this book, I mean, there's a few concepts that stand out. One is what he calls the level 5 leader. And the level 5 leader, I think a lot of people think of a leader as this kind of egotistical person who's going to lead the way. But actually, he describes these level 5 leaders are often more humble. They help install the culture. And one great trait of a level 5 leader, that when they leave the organization, the culture carries on. Whereas what he calls a level 4 leader is when they leave, the culture just implodes. It's like they were propping it up with their own energy. They've not really installed something. So that was a great
that's such an important distinction.
Yeah, and there were some other things that I've seen in so many books. This concept he says about hiring people, right seats. And I use that one all of the time. And when he's talking about people, he's talking about culture. Like, they're the right people. They belong in your business. They align with you. They share your cultural values. They get energy from the similar things that you do. And over time, their role might change, but they're the right people because they align with you the culture, and that's the first filter. And this is really important because I see so many people get their hiring wrong because they focus purely on the technical or the delivery, but they don't look at the culture side, which is what's going to be important for when they stay in the long run and if you're going to build the culture you want. So he talks about right people first, and then right seats. He's talking about, well, do they get it, the job you're looking for, want it, and have the capacity to do it? So are they talented to be able to deliver? And that's the second filter. So, right people can get on the bus, and then are they in the right seat? Kind of a secondary but important thing. So that's such a powerful concept, and I've seen that pop up in so many other books, including Traction, which was also written by Gino Wickman, who wrote Rocket Fuel, which is the book I referred to earlier. So that was a really important concept to me, and I refer to that frequently. And then one that's also really known from that book is this hedgehog concept, it's called.
Oh, yeah. I love the hedgehog principle.
And it's kind of like the ikigai, and I'm sure I heard James Schramko talking about ikigai is not what you think it is, so I'll probably be annoying him by saying this. But it's like that overlap of what you're good at, or like what you're best at, what's your unique ability in terms of your business, what you're passionate about, and what's profitable, like that one thing in the middle, that hedgehog concept. And one of the things I like about that is so many people, especially visionaries, they go after all of these shiny objects. But if they go after too many shiny objects, they don't get much done. And so one of the attributes he's talking about, along with the hedgehog concept, is focus on your strengths. And if you spread yourself too thin, that is a problem. So one of the attributes he noticed was those businesses that did well, they just focused on that hedgehog concept. They didn't spread themselves too thin. And that was one of the key takeaways. And then I guess the final point that jumps up to me is really about just they stay constant. They have this sort of flywheel. They consistently put energy in all conditions, and eventually, they emerge through the ups and downs as a high performing great player. So that's my finale recommendation.
Yeah. No, so that is actually of your three books. That is actually the only one that's on my bookshelf. I do have Traction. You just mentioned Traction. I do have that, but and it's interesting how you talked about the hedgehog concept, because I had and I don't know whether I misinterpreted it or whether he used that idea in this context as well. But what the thing that I'm finding fascinating is that you got different things to me.
Oh, right. Wow.
of the value out of that book. And what I took the hedgehog concept to mean was that because there's all sorts of things that you could track, there's all sorts of metrics that you could track. And what I took the hedgehog concept to mean is that if we had to track one metric, what would it be? And because it's very easy to get too Pythagoras with all of your KPIs. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like you can track too much stuff, and it just becomes prohibitive from a time perspective, and it becomes confusing from an operational perspective. And so one of the things, it's like, let's track the one. What is the one metric? And I think that's often what people use to refer to that net promoter score. You know how everyone talks about the net promoter score? Yes. And that's the one thing. It's like, how willing would our customers be to recommend us to friends, family, and advocates? So I think there was, like I said, either I misinterpreted, because it was fairly, it was a long time ago that I read it. But the other thing that I loved about that was you said right people, right seat. But the other thing that I got out of that was, if you get the right people on the bus, it doesn't matter where you go, it's going to be good. Yeah, right.
And you can find, like, in my team, I was talking about this guy in my team who now does video editing for me. He wasn't doing that in the beginning, but he's absolutely a right fit for the culture of my business. I know where my bus is going. He's going to be on the journey. I love that.
Yeah. 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 So I've often used that. You hear yourself using the same stuff over and over again. I've often heard myself saying, "Hey, hedgehog concept. If we were going to track one metric, what would it be?" And the other one is if you get the right people on the bus, it doesn't necessarily matter where you go. It's going to be good because you've got the right people there.
Yeah.
Because because it's the right chemistry and all the rest of it. So I love that, and I love the fact that we both read the same book. Admittedly, I read it a while ago, and got different stuff out of it. Right?
Amazing book. I mean, there's so many things in that one. Yeah, it's worth a reread, I think.
So this is the one that I've probably thrashed the most. You can see, it's got all sorts of bloody post-it notes sticking out of it, and it's dog-eared, and it's got notes all the way through it. And it's written by Chet Holmes, who sadly passed away. A number was several years ago now, but it's just such a brilliant book because he talks about having 12 key strategies. He's massive on trade shows. He's massive on the actual sales process itself. He's massive on time management. He's massive on education-based marketing, which has always been a really big part of what I've done. But he also talks about this whole idea of, from a martial arts perspective, is not being a master of a million techniques. It's like, no, be a master of the 12 fundamentals, and you'll be deadly because you'll know how to use those as well as what you possibly can. And I did, I bought the book, but I also he did like an education program in conjunction with Tony Robbins. And I bought that, and I was part of that sort of mastermind thing for a while. And it was really sad when he passed away because he was a brilliant strategist. So I've used, the concepts in this book, over and over again in terms of business building, going after your right. He talks about the dream buyer. Who is your dream client? And so much of what I've done over the years is helping people to really get clear on who their best buyer is. Who's your best buyer? Let's go after them. Let's get in front of them. Let's show how much value we can add to them. So that's been a huge part of what I've focused on for both myself and my clients over the years.
I love that book. I remember getting through the audio book of that, and that's how I consume most of mine. And it's,
do you? Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Like,
where's your books? Where actually are they?
Yeah.
I do actually have quite a few books, but I'm in the process of moving, so they're in a box. But most of it I just get through on Audible, and I crunch through. I can get through one a week, and then I just enjoy summarizing them and putting them on LinkedIn. But that Ultimate Sales Machine was one of them. And what you just said, it's such an all-encompassing book. And the thing that really resonated with me in that one was what you were talking about, that dream buyer, that dream 100. And I thought, well, Chet Holmes, I don't think he was around for the age of how social media promoting's gone, like that whole era. But that concept of the Dream 100 is still so relevant for social media. Like if you were to try and identify your Dream 100 and how can I engage and get the attention of these people? And in that time, he was talking about, whether you're sending them gifts or how you're going to engage them. But it could also just be, let's talk to these people. How can I reach them? And it might even be on social media. I love that book, and really.
I've heard so many people like Russell Brunson and people of that kind of profile, all talking about it. Years and years after he passed away, and I hear that and I go, I know where you got that from.
Wow.
The old Dream 100.
All right.
So, mate, that's awesome. So perhaps we'll summarise. You had Rocket Fuel by Gino Wickman. You had Who, Not How, Dan Sullivan, and Benjamin who?
Dr. Benjamin Hardy.
Benjamin Harley?
Hardy. And they've done 3 books
Dr. Benjamin
now.
Hardy.
Yeah,
got
so
it.
there's a few by those two.
Got it. And Good to Great by Jim Collins. I had the new Strategic Selling, which it's actually not that new. It was published a while ago, but it's still super relevant for dealing with enterprise level type sales, by Robert Miller and Stephen Hyman, Heiman. Good to Great by Chet Holmes, and Value-Based Fees by Alan Weiss. So, mate, I reckon this will be super valuable for anyone. You know, and the thing I love about it is that it kind of deals with, you know, the sort of the business engine sales part of it, and it also deals with the operations part of it. So I think it'll be a really cool episode for anyone who's looking to improve things and get an edge on what they're up to.
I love talking about this, and it's so interesting about the, you know, value-based one by Alan Weiss. You know, I'd missed that. I didn't even know that book existed. And that's going straight on the reading list. Coming soon.
Yeah, awesome. All right, mate. Well, thanks so much for coming on, and mate, we'll have to do this again.
Would love to. Thanks again, John.
You've been listening to Master Dealmaker Secrets with John Blake. Subscribe to get more in-depth strategies and maximize your sales process with new episodes every other week. And double your inquiry to sale conversion with the lead flow you already have. Go to johnblakeaudio.com for his exclusive, free, no-fluff audio training and companion PDF guide.